Wilt Chamberlain was more than a basketball icon, he was a godlike figure, both revered and feared, who became a living legend among his rivals. Yet, behind the staggering records and public bravado lay disturbing accounts that even his most loyal supporters found impossible to justify. You went on the record with a bombshell that is destined to shadow your legacy, the claim that you shared a bed with 20,000 women. Those were your own words. Today, basketball greats are finally breaking their silence on the boundaries Wilt ignored and how his personal lifestyle choices defined his reputation. The 20,000 Partners Firestorm. In 1991, Wilt Chamberlain released his life story titled A View from Above. Within those pages, he made an assertion that would haunt his name for the rest of his days and long after. He boasted of having intimate relations with over 20,000 people, a figure he arrived at through his own mental math. Starting at age 15, he calculated an average of roughly 1.2 new companions every single day of his adult life. Chamberlain presented himself as a romantic powerhouse, crediting his success to his massive frame, unshakable poise, and professional celebrity. The public pushback was immediate and incredibly harsh. Women's rights advocates and scholars slammed the boast as a textbook example of male ego run wild, where a man of power viewed physical intimacy as a mere numbers game instead of a shared human connection. Critics argued that even if the math worked, it reduced women to mere trophies. To make matters worse, the timing was disastrous. The book debuted during the peak of the AIDS crisis, just as Magic Johnson went public with his HIV status. Concerned citizens began questioning Chamberlain's own personal habits and his stance on medical safety. Observers worried he was glorifying recklessness by ignoring safe practices, sparking a national debate from late-night stages to newsrooms. Comedy icons like David Letterman and Jay Leno ridiculed the claim at every possible opportunity. Across the nation, Wilt's name became the primary punchline for jokes regarding hypersexuality. During a sit-down with Conan O'Brien, the host made it clear that this one detail would forever color the public's view of him. You put this out there, and frankly, this claim of betting 20,000 women is going to stick to you for a long time. You really stood by that statement. And honestly, when you drop a figure like that, you have to expect people to bring it up constantly. Wilt tried to spin the controversy, suggesting his admission was actually a teachable moment rather than a tabloid scandal. Look, I called them encounters. I actually thought I was invited here to receive a commendation from the school board. Because these days, every time someone spots me in public, they start doing the math. They figure if I started at 15 and I am now 55, they divide 20,000 by the 365 days in a year, and well, you see the result. It gets their brains working. If nothing else, I am helping the world master mathematics. Despite his witty deflections, the damage was permanent. The fallout moved past media jabs into serious debates regarding social representation. Activists expressed concern that his claims reinforced harmful, long-standing tropes regarding the sexuality of African American men. This issue later became a focal point for academics studying the intersection of racial identity and professional athletics. Chamberlain stood his ground in follow-up appearances, maintaining that the 20,000 mark was a sincere approximation rather than a literal tally. Yet, he did voice one regret not for his actions, but for the distress his honesty caused his family members. Reports suggested his sisters were deeply mortified by the ensuing media circus and public scrutiny. Modern basketball stars have met the claim with heavy doubt. Dwight Howard, who idolized Wilt as a boy, questioned the sheer logistics. In that era, teams were not traveling on luxury private jets. I mean, those guys were spending half their lives on cramped buses. They were taking regular commercial flights. When exactly would he have the opportunity to meet that many people every day? Betting 20 people a day? Come on. You would have to make that your only priority in life, Dwight. You find time if it is a goal, sure, but nobody is dominating the court, practicing, and managing 20 daily encounters. I just do not believe any human being has the physical stamina to perform 20 times in 24 hours. The narrative took a much darker turn when the actress known as Elvira, the legendary horror hostess, went public decades later with disturbing allegations of sexual assault. Her autobiography describes how her friendship with the star shattered during a party at the Playboy Mansion. Modeling for Playboy meant I was a regular there. I bumped into Will constantly over time, and we became quite close. He was Uncle Wilty to me. Honestly, I truly believed we shared a genuine bond. Eventually, I attended one of his bashes where he forced himself on me. The shock was paralyzing. It felt surreal. Reporting, it seemed pointless. No one would believe a struggling actress over a global hoops icon. Following her brave revelation, Elvira questioned Chamberlain's notorious boast, a sentiment that echoes loudly in today's Me Too movement. His book bragged about 20,000 lovers. It makes you stop and think, were those encounters truly all mutual? It's a haunting thought. Surfacing long after his passing, this claim casts a dark shadow over his legendary status. That figure of 20,000, once dismissed as a joke or hyperbole, now faces harsh, modern examination. Yet, the storm following Chamberlain wasn't limited to his private affairs. His actions on the hardwood sparked equally fierce arguments. Feuds and the Me First label. Away from the spotlight, Wilt dealt with non-stop backlash regarding his playing style. One critique haunted him constantly. He was viewed as a ball hog. Critics claimed he padded stats, chasing personal glory while neglecting the collective win. Peers, mentors, and pundits all chimed in, making his ego a focal point of his career post-mortem. His career-defining war was with Bill Russell. These Titans squared off 142 times, including 49 postseason battles. Russell's Celtics dominated, leading 57-37 in the season and 29-20 in the playoffs. With a 7-1 series record, Boston's juggernaut constantly knocked Wilt out of contention. Statistically speaking, Wilt usually crushed Russell's numbers, putting up 30 points and 28 boards against Bill's 14 and 24. However, Russell's gritty leadership secured 11 rings, while Chamberlain managed only 2. The gap in hardware suggested Wilt lacked the ruthless team-first drive that Bill perfected. Pundits argued Wilt cared more about his own highlight reel than the scoreboard. This reputation stuck for decades, though Russell told a very different story about their bond. No matter how hard they fought on court, they stayed true friends until Wilt passed away. Keep his memory alive for me. Deal? Looking back, the core truth is that we were essentially brothers. Absolutely, we weren't just rivals or peers, we were confidants who shared everything. During their sit-down in 1997, Wilt tackled the myth of their mutual hatred and the loser tag that plagued him. Folks assumed we were enemies. People couldn't fathom how two dominant forces could actually respect and like one another. They figured I must be jealous. I only envied the respect he got, whereas I was often labeled a failure. If I'm a loser, then everyone else is too. Russell admitted that guarding Wilt was a nightmare, noting that a single defensive trick never worked on him more than once. What was the biggest challenge in facing Wilt? You couldn't use the same blueprint twice. He'd figure you out instantly. Every matchup was a unique puzzle. Bill often highlights just how frequently we went head-to-head. That is absolutely spot on. The connection between Chamberlain and Kareem soured from idol worship into deep resentment. Back when he was Lou Alcindor, Kareem worshipped Wilt, seeking his wisdom at UCLA. Wilt mentored him on the rigors of stardom. They first met professionally in 1969, eventually splitting 28 games with 14 wins apiece. Famous footage shows Wilt swatting Kareem's skyhook repeatedly during their 1972 playoff showdown. It was an incredible display of defensive grit from a man already in his mid-30s. However, their personal relationship deteriorated rapidly as the 1970s progressed. Big Wilt didn't hold back, labeling Abdul-Jabbar a total flake and a whiner for his trade demands. Meanwhile, Kareem fired back, questioning Wilt's commitment to the grind. Their clash hit politics too. Wilt backed Richard Nixon while Kareem took a stand for social justice. Wilt's later takes were trashed as bitter relics, but the real heat stayed on his reputation for hunting stats over team success. To many on the inside, he was a chaotic element who prioritized his own milestones over winning rings. Back when he first started out, critics said he'd shoot every time just to pad his scoring. To shut them up, Wilt flipped the script in 1968. He actually topped the league in assists with 8.6 a night, propelling Philly to a championship. Yet, skeptics still called it a calculated stunt rather than a shift toward team play. Lakers icons like Elgin Baylor and Jerry West were vocal about their headaches. Baylor wrote that Wilt's record hunting broke their rhythm. Things turned truly ugly with his 1969 coach, Butch Van Breda Kolff, who famously benched a sluggish Wilt during the final minutes of a championship decider. That one call split the locker room and the entire city of Los Angeles right down the middle. The knock on Wilt's postseason disappearing act became the ultimate weapon against his legacy. He went from 30.1 points in the regular season to just 22.5 when it counted, a 25% drop-off that happened like clockwork. Experts still debate if he's the biggest postseason letdown ever. Wilt had his own bone to pick with the league, trashing it as amateur hour for what he saw as rigged officiating and pure envy of his physical gifts. Even with the labels of a selfish loser hanging over him, nobody could touch the raw power he brought to the hardwood. He was a literal game changer. Put aside the drama and the ego talk for a second, and you're left with a resume that basically broke the record books forever. He was such a cheat code that the Bachelor of Arts actually rewrote the rules just to give everyone else a fighting chance. Legend Oscar Robertson, the Big O himself, dropped some truth about what Wilt really meant to the sport. Oscar made it clear that during those early, shaky years, Wilt was the one keeping the league afloat. "I loved being around the guy because he was a massive character," Oscar recalled. Wilt would talk a big game, but he backed it up by putting on a clinic and literally carrying the league for a decade. "I always bring up the time the Sixers moved west and Syracuse landed in Philly. Wilt averaged 50 points a night then, yet people barely even mention it today. It's just mind-blowing." Oscar was stunned by stats that sound like fairy tales now, like the night Wilt snatched 50 rebounds. Hell, Russell had 48 that night too. Try to wrap your head around one guy grabbing 50 boards in a single pro game. It's totally insane. Truly. And get this, the man never sat down. He stayed on the floor for every single tick of the clock. The numbers from his peak years are basically science fiction. Back in 1961, he averaged 48.5 minutes a game, essentially playing the whole game plus overtime every night while putting up 50 points and 25 rebounds. He cleared 50 points 45 times that year, including a ridiculous streak of 7 straight 60-point nights. His peak moment was March 2nd, 1962, dropping 100 points on the Knicks, a record that has stood for over 60 years. He drained 36 shots and 28 free throws, personally accounting for nearly 60% of his team's offense. When he sat down with Conan O'Brien to talk about that legendary night, Wilt got real about how conflicted that massive performance actually made him feel. Truthfully, the other team was just humiliated by the whole spectacle, he admitted. They were ticked off, but I was just out there vibing. Conan asked him if hitting 85 made him feel a bit guilty. I really did. I actually started trying to brick shots, but they kept going in until I hit 100. Even my mom gave me a hard time for being so ruthless when I finally got home. Show some respect for yourself. That was a brutal shift, and you know it. The league had to overhaul its entire rulebook just to contain Chamberlain's power. In 1964, officials widened the lane to 16 feet just to keep him from camping under the rim. They outlawed offensive goaltending because he could snatch balls right as they began their downward arc. Even dunking from the stripe was banned, since Wilt could leap from the line and rattle the rim. During a sit-down with Conan, Chamberlain detailed how vastly different the old-school expectations were. In his prime, flashy maneuvers were seen as insults rather than highlights. Back in my day, if you pulled off a 360, rivals took it as a slap in the face. Even with a massive lead, your own coach would bench you immediately while the crowd branded you a total show-off. So you're saying Michael Jordan would have been a permanent bench warmer in your era? Without a doubt, Wilt's physical gifts went far beyond the basketball hardwood. He cleared 6 feet 6 inches in high jump and sprinted the 100-yard dash in 10.9 seconds. His post-NBA volleyball career was so legendary, he made the International Volleyball Hall of Fame in 1978. When LeBron James finally surpassed Wilt on the scoring charts, he marveled at the singular, almost alien nature of Chamberlain's athleticism. Alongside Shaq, he was the most unstoppable force we've ever seen, a true 100-point icon. He was an absolute titan of scoring and rebounding who dictated the tempo of every game. A rare, multifaceted specimen whose versatility was completely unheard of in that time period. He was a master of every craft, yet even his superhuman frame couldn't outrun mortality. Passing away at 63, the mystery of his final hours became as legendary as his life. Rumors swirled after he was discovered unresponsive at his Bel Air estate on October 12, 1999. He was only 63 when congestive heart failure finally brought the giant down. His death stunned the globe. He was the ultimate symbol of endurance and invincibility. This was a man who averaged nearly 49 minutes a game. yet he perished in his early 60s. Even in his final years, Chamberlain bragged about maintaining his Herculean strength. He told Conan O'Brien stories of his lifting power that seemed almost mythical to listeners. I'm talking about a guy who could bench press 600 pounds at his absolute peak. I've hit 510. Give me a little time and I'll be in your league, friend. Dwight Howard later confirmed these tales, noting that Arnold Schwarzenegger himself witnessed Wilt's raw power. Arnold talked about his strength constantly, calling him the most powerful human he'd ever met. Think about it, the world's greatest bodybuilder was in total awe of Wilt's muscle. While the 20,000 number sounds wild, I can totally believe he moved massive weight. Behind the image of the perfect specimen, Wilt had been masking cardiac issues for decades. Reports of a racing heart surfaced in the 60s, though he hid his vulnerability to protect his legend. After a 1992 hospital stay for arrhythmia, his health began a steep, final decline. He unintentionally dropped 50 pounds as his body started to fail him. Bound to an oxygen tank with heavily swollen legs, the giant could barely navigate his own home. He checked himself out of the hospital that summer, choosing to face the end on his own terms. Experts later pinpointed several factors that likely triggered his sudden heart collapse. Carrying 300 pounds on a 7'1" frame put astronomical stress on his cardiovascular system. Some theories suggest a bacterial infection from a late-life dental surgery played a role. Others speculate that a lifetime of well-documented excesses may have slowly scarred his heart. His famous claim of 20,000 women became forever linked to the mystery of his passing. The speculation continues. Vicious rumors swirled that his wild lifestyle triggered his downfall, with baseless whispers of viral infections or secret illnesses, supposedly scarring his heart. Medical professionals and his inner circle quickly dismantled the slander, proving his passing stemmed from chronic cardiac failure, even as online trolls and gossip rags clung to their twisted narratives. That infamous memoir had effectively fused his sexual reputation with his mortality in the eyes of the masses. To the cynical, his passing at 63 felt like a dark cosmic reckoning. A titan of excess finally meeting his bill. Without a comprehensive medical examination, Wilt's swift cremation left a void where scientific proof should have been, fueling endless speculation about his final moments. Typical symptoms of viral collapse were nowhere to be seen, and multiple negative test results should have cleared his name, but in the ruthless court of public perception, that 20,000 claim had already sealed his fate. Bill Russell's raw reaction to the news laid bare a brotherhood that transcended the court. Man, he is gone. He was one of the truly special ones. Yeah, it is a massive hole in my world. While he was still around, it felt like our legendary battles were my ultimate constant, my true north. We had this bond, you know? It was arguably the most intense rivalry in the entire history of American athletics. Russell attended the Los Angeles Memorial, where he shared a hauntingly beautiful detail about their final days. Following the funeral, I was at the service when his nephew pulled me aside and said, "There is something you really need to hear." I was clearing his desk and found a pile of callbacks he needed to make. Your name sat right there on top. Wilt's passing ended his physical journey, but the firestorm surrounding his greatness was only just beginning to ignite. If anything, the debate grew more polarized as the years ticked by. It remains a tangled, brilliant legacy. Decades later, Wilt's place on the all-time ladder remains a battlefield. His statistical output looks like fiction, 72 NBA milestones, headlined by that mythical 100-point game and a season where he averaged 50.4. Yet, his jewelry box only held 2 rings, a fraction of Russell's 11 or Jordan's 6. Even Michael Jordan dismissed the GOAT debate, calling the attempt to rank stars from different eras a logical dead end. A decade ago, everyone obsessed over whether Jack or Tiger reigned supreme, a debate most now consider settled. I see it differently, though. Here's a better way to look at it, because, honestly, you can never definitively crown a single greatest of all time. That is just marketing noise meant to drive engagement and sell headlines. Jack and Tiger never crossed paths on the same green with the same gear. Similarly, I never squared off against Wilt Chamberlain. The equipment was different, the courses were different. I never stood on the same floor as Wilt. I never had to match up with a legend like Jerry West. Jordan then dismantled the championship metric, shielding Wilt from critics who use ring counts as the only measure of worth. That is how people judge things now. I secured 6 titles, while Bill Russell grabbed 11. Does that make him superior to me, or vice versa? Absolutely not. We played in separate worlds. Trying to crown a single king across history is a flawed experiment. It is a completely rigged choice. Shaquille O'Neal, who prided himself on being the ultimate force of nature, admitted to a deep-seated envy, confessing his burning desire to wipe Wilt's name off the record books. You mentioned those legends you still respect and converse with. Looking at this Chamberlain card actually stings. I desperately wanted to overtake him in total points. I wanted to be the only name mentioned. The Big Aristotle. Superman. The Diesel. The absolute most dominant force ever. Had I surpassed his numbers, I would have told the world Shaquille O'Neal is the king of dominance, case closed. Sure, I have more jewelry, but he owns the 50-point nights. He owns the boards. He owns the scoring. When pressed on a hypothetical matchup, Shaq did not hesitate, admitting he would have tried to physically break his idol. What would have happened if the Diesel had actually stepped into the ring with the Big Dipper? Should we trade stories? You go first, then I'll follow. Right, I'll give you my take on Wilt. Here is the thing, though. Seeing him mess around with my hero would have pushed me over the edge. Simple as that. It would have absolutely infuriated me. I would have told him, Doc, you are focusing on the wrong guy. Then, from the very first tip-off, I'm coming for his head. During their iconic 1997 sit-down, Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain did not hold back. Both legends insisted they would crush today's big men. When asked about his potential scoring today, Wilt's reply was staggering. If you stepped onto the court right now, what kind of numbers are we talking about? Today? Well, even at my current age, I could probably drop 30, my friend. Mark my words. In my prime, I would easily average 60 or 70 points a night. Honestly, I am actually being modest about that. No disrespect to the current crop of talent, but the modern style is tailor-made for my game. Trust me, it suits me perfectly. Yet, Wilt's legacy transcends mere box scores and arguments. His sheer presence forced 1960s rule, shifts wider lanes, and bans on goaltending or free throw dunks that redefined basketball. These pivots pushed the sport toward outside shooting and versatile skill sets. This carved the path for today's league, focused on floor spacing and hybrid superstars. Current titans like Joel Embiid, Nikola Jokic, and Giannis Antetokounmpo all trace their roots to Wilt. Embiid pairs that classic fadeaway with a long-range touch. Jokic mirrors Wilt's 1968 passing clinic, while Giannis replicates that unstoppable coast-to-coast power. The great Wilt paradox. He was so unstoppable that anything less than total victory felt like a letdown. It is a heavy burden others rarely had to carry. From his legendary off-court claims to his fierce feuds and reputation for being self-centered, even his final days are shrouded in debate. Still, Bill Russell knew him best. After 142 battles and a lifetime of shared travel and quiet moments, they stayed close despite the media constantly trying to tear them apart. They never felt the need to settle the debate that obsessed everyone else. To this day, Chamberlain stands as a peerless force of nature. He literally broke the game, forcing the league to rewrite the rulebook just to contain him. Complex and combative, he was as divisive as he was talented. Judging his journey reflects our own biases. At 63, his heart finally gave out. The noise that followed him in life lived on long after he was gone. 20 years later, the world is still talking exactly as he would have liked. Thanks for tuning in. If you enjoyed this, tap one of the videos on your screen to dive into more stories.